So guys, having had a few days to experiment with different setups in the Yorktown meta fight, I have just updated my rotating seasonal tier list to reflect the fight. If you haven't already, you should also check out this video where I explain the mechanics and share some of the more developed fleets for more context. I won't be showcasing those same fleets again in this video. The main gimmick of this fight is having ships that add to your ally count, so I've added the ones that I've used that have worked quite well. The first two are Laffy 2 and Momo Belia Deviluk, both of whom summon 2 allies every 20 seconds, lasting for 15 seconds. They're the best options if you're going for a 3-strike setup, which would be most setups involving carriers holding LA9s, the best of which being Soyuz, Nakimov, and Fitzrume. For a 3-strike setup, your attacks will probably happen at 20-something seconds, and then 40-something seconds, and then 60-something to 70 seconds, for which their summons will be alive and increasing Yorktown's damage taken. Aside from their summons, they also have a little bit of additional support. Laffy has really good anti-air to prevent your carriers from being revealed, and she also reduces the anti-air of the boss slightly so that your carriers deal just a little bit more damage, and she can easily main tank. Momo increases the damage of your entire fleet by 5% on the same timer as her plant spawns, which should be right when your main fleet attacks. She also has small RNG stat buffs as well. However, if you're using 4-strike setups, which would be most advanced battleship setups, then your attacks would go off before each 20-second interval so that you can squeeze in one last round before the battle ends at 80 seconds, in which case Laffy 2 and Momo would not work very well, and that is where the next two come in. First up is Kurumi. The clones that Kurumi summons do not expire. By your first round of attacks, she might only have one clone up, but typically by the end of the battle, she'll have somewhere between 3 to 4 clones alive at the same time, increasing damage dealt by a significant margin, and you don't have to worry about timing anything. If Kurumi herself is sank, she'll take the place of one of her clones, so ideally you should not use her as the main tank to keep the number of clones as high as possible in order to maximize damage. She also constantly slows the boss with her field, which helps a lot with the hit rate of your battleships, although you can't rely on it solely, because it's not guaranteed that the boss will be slowed when it needs to be, but there will be a lot of moments when the boss just happens to be in one of her zones, and more attacks from your battleships land as a result. Duisburg, on the other hand, summons 2 allies every 15 seconds, but they last for 12 seconds, so there's only a downtime of 3 seconds between summons, which should cover the majority of attacks. Aside from providing 2 extra allies, she doesn't really contribute much else. The last is Kursk, who also summons 2 allies every 15 seconds, but she's much more frail and a pain to keep alive compared to all the others. So I would not recommend using her unless you have no other options. At one point, the submarines that she summons were not quoted to die upon retreating, so they kept the ally counter incremented for the entire battle, which made it really easy to one-shot the boss with just Kursk providing extra allies, but it was quickly patched out and now her summons need to be alive just like everyone else's. To wrap up this tier, you'll want at least 1, but personally I think the sweet spot is 2 of the summon ships in the vanguard for the best results. If your main fleet will strike 3 times, then Laffy and Momo are the best options, but if they strike 4 times, then you're better off with Kurumi and Duisburg. You can also use Kurumi and Duisburg in 3-strike setups, since they're more lenient timing-wise, but they're inferior options as ships outside of summons. Next, I'll go over the S-tier main fleet options. The first is Lion, who is extremely easy to use and contributes the most damage outside of very specific compositions. She also doesn't necessitate any difficult to obtain equipment. She's been out for a while now, so I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said. Next up is Soyuz, who is good in both battleship and carrier fleets alike, and for multiple reasons. First, you do need some kind of reliable slow or route for the boss, but with 2 vanguard slots already being taken up just for ships that summon allies, and also not a lot of damage being dealt to your vanguard, it's hard to find room for Eldritch. As a result, Soyuz's value is very high due to her guaranteed slow. Second, her personal damage is the highest against the medium as a result of her armor mods, and it is very respectable even in comparison to other UR battleships, despite perhaps being more well known for her support abilities. And finally, she just has perfect synergy with the next two ships, maximizing their damage while also activating Trafalgar's evasion rate debuff since she's a battleship. Moving on, we have Fritz Rume, who has a loadout of 8 LA9s, and generally she's just like a carrier version of Lion against light and medium armor, bringing high damage by herself without condition, while also increasing the damage of the rest of the fleet, although she is slightly behind Lion in both aspects when on her own. Aside from the obvious combo with Soyuz and Akimov, even if you don't have LA9s, she can get off 4 airstrikes with the gold BF-109Gs pretty easily, so you can slot her in a fleet with 2 battleships, and low-key, her 30% slow stacked with Trafalgar's 15% slow, and then also potentially Kurumi slow, is sufficiently consistent. Next is Nakimov, who is behind Fritz Rume because she's tied at the hip to Soyuz. It's also more awkward to use her without LA9s, because ideally you would want to do a 4-strike setup with BF-109Gs as a replacement, but Nakimov is just a little bit slower than Fritz Rume, mostly because of her torpedo slot, so you have to sacrifice her torpedo bomber slot just to squeeze in that last airstrike. However, provided you have everything, my favorite setup currently is the combo of Soyuz, Nakimov, and Fritz Rume, as there is very little variance from run to run, and they just kill the boss faster because you're using fewer battleships. Next up is Mecklenburg. She does really good damage, even by herself, but the problem is that her reload buff is locked behind having at least another Ironclad main fleet ship, so I think it's best if you used her with Fritz Rume or Bismarck Sway. You can still use her without any other Ironbloods, but only if you have the Mecklenburg gun to make up for the lack of reload, but in that case, her damage might be closer to A tier. The last ship in S tier is once again Vanguard. Her damage contribution is still very high, with similar output to Mecklenburg when there are 2 other battleships making full use of her buffs. However, adjusting reload with 3 battleships using AP guns can get a bit finicky if you don't have Mecklenburg guns to create more leeway, so be aware of that. Alright, moving on, we have the S tier Vanguards, for which there is only one, because the other 2 Vanguard slots are already occupied, and Trafalgar just happens to be better than everyone else for the last slot. She contributes the most damage with her evasion rate debuff, can main tank with 2 HP auxiliaries because there isn't too much damage, and also brings enough anti-air to keep your carriers concealed most of the time. She's just the perfect ship for the last Vanguard slot. Next up are the A tier main fleet ships. Bismarck is mostly relevant as a Mecklenburg tier leader, and you can kinda cope with her black hole instead of using a slow like Soyuz is, but it's definitely worse. Her damage output is good, but not as good as the S tiers, so she's an A tier. Next up is Monarch, who is a discount Soyuz. She brings an even stronger slow than Soyuz, but less damage. Finally, we have Alsace, Warspite, and Centaur, all 3 contributing mostly just solid damage, worthy of a mention. Next, we have the A tier Vanguards. All of them are not far from Trafalgar in damage contribution, but slightly worse. Plymouth, Z-52, and Guam are much tankier than Trafalgar, but that tankiness is not really necessary for this fight. The remaining ships are ships that I haven't tried, but I know their performance well enough relative to other ships that they should work just as well. For instance, if Warspite provides enough damage, then Kearsarge, Raffaello, and New Jersey's damage output should be sufficient as well. Not to say that they all do the exact same damage, but they're around the same ballpark. And the same goes for Yorktown and Essex given that Centaur works. A-Gear can provide solid damage and a slow if you need it, and Eldritch just provides a consistent slow from the Vanguard but probably isn't going to be great. Then, the last 3 Vanguards are just some extras that I tagged on that should be able to pull their weight in damage contribution if your fleet composition suits them, but there isn't really that much space in the Vanguard given how important summons are for this fight. Okay, that's it for this Yorktown meta tier list. In the next video, I'm going to showcase some more fleets that I found success with, including a lot of ones that don't require you to have LA9s or Mecklenburg guns. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.